Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Divorce Happens, the podcast where we support you before, during, and after divorce with education, inspiration, and a little bit of laughter. Because as we know, divorce happens and then you start fresh. And we're here with one of our Fresh Starts experts talking about a very, very important topic today. Matthew, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, my name is Matthew DiBrino. I am a former practicing divorce attorney. I started my journey in law in 1999. I clerked for the Honorable Thomas F. Brogan in the Passaic County. He at that time was in the family division. From there, I went to work and I got a lot of training from who I feel is one of the best attorneys, Jose Basterica in Paterson, New Jersey. And I went along that line of divorce for quite some time until about 10 years ago when I had left and opened up High Quality Mortgage. So now I'm a mortgage broker. I haven't practiced law in 10 years, but I do offer a lot of support to the divorce attorneys in my area and as well as the clients that are going through a divorce. And one thing to note too is I was also trained by Joseph Noto, who's one of the founders of the collaborative divorce process. And the collaborative divorce process, as you know, is to kind of take the bite out of the divorce and try to go through it in a much more amicable way.
Absolutely. Well, there's literally nobody better to talk to about this than you, then I think, because
I,
you know everything. So,
around the block.
I I know, having gone through my own divorce, having owned a home with my ex-husband, then trying to figure out what we were going to do with the home. The house is like the number one thing people are concerned about when the concept of a separation comes up. I love your, I guess, thoughts. Like, and this podcast is for people to really just kind of get like the information, right? Because a lot of we don't educate people on divorce, and so they're listening to this thinking like, I have no idea what's going on. What's the first steps that happen if you have a mortgage on your home, you both own the home together, and you're going to go through a divorce? You may not know yet what you're going to do with the house. What do you do in terms of the mortgage?
Sure. Well, you really want to establish options for the home, okay? And that's going to start with the valuation of the home. So getting a fair market appraisal of the home is going to be a really excellent starter point because from that point, you really have three options. You could either sell the home and equally split the proceeds, or that may change pending the divorce,
Mhm.
or one party could do a buyout of the other party, which essentially means, and I like to use play numbers, if there's $100,000 of equity in the home, house is worth 400, 300 left on the mortgage, there's $100,000 of equity. Half of that belongs to each party, which means that the buying out spouse would have to produce $50,000 to the other spouse to get them off the deed and the mortgage. So those are really your options. So what I would like to see happen a little bit more often is a lot of times we see in a divorce process that comes up a lot. Maybe husband's going to buy out wife or wife's going to buy out husband. They usually put some time frames in there. They got to do it within 6 months of the judgment of divorce, and then they put in place a few natural extensions of time. But what I see most likely, or which has been the problem, is the party that agrees to buy the other party out. Sometimes they just can't qualify for the loan, and sometimes that happens at the time you make the agreement. So what I would love to see a little bit more is that during these early parts of the divorce, during the mediation, during the early settlement panel, I would love to see everyone actually get pre-approved and see if that part of the settlement is actually possible.
I love that. And you can get, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can get pre-approved even before you kind of talk about divorce, no? Like,
Oh,
or do you have,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there's some outside factors, but what we do with a pre-approval is we take a look at usable income. So usable income really depends on what you do for work and how you get paid for work. If you're a simple salary employee, a W-2 employee, it's a
Mhm.
simple calculation. If you're self-employed, it becomes a little bit more complicated because we have to take a look at tax returns. But all that information is going to be pretty standard pre-divorce. Now,
Right.
the only thing that we would have to take into account in that wouldn't be available at this early stage in the process is whether or not a party is either paying child support or alimony or receiving child support and alimony. But it's a really good idea to see where you are beforehand to see if it's even a possibility, because if it's not a possibility for a buyout or it's not a possibility for one person for a buyout, you're saving a lot of time, a lot of anguish, and you're also saving a lot of attorney's fees in getting to that point.
That's so interesting. I never thought about that. Can somebody get pre-approved before they even mention divorce to their spouse? Like,
Yeah,
can you do
it's
that quietly?
absolutely. Our pre-approval process is fairly simple.
Okay.
For us personally, it's an online portal, very simple application. We're going to require some income documentations to verify the income. But yes, absolutely. We could pull their credit separately from their spouse to have an
Mhm.
idea. And then from there, you do have spouses that sometimes are very amicable and they really don't want to see the spouse leave the house. So if
Yep.
there is a child support or an alimony figure, we may be able to tailor that amount to make sure that it gives them enough to get to effectuate the refinance.
Okay. Yeah, so in my case, as an example, my ex was very kind and let me refinance the house under my income only, and
Hmm.
so I got to, keep the house in that way. And it was definitely like nerve-wracking because I owned my own company, and so I wanted to make sure I could afford it.
Yes.
And so I didn't even know that you needed a mortgage person when you go through a divorce. So can you talk briefly about like the importance of having a mortgage lender that that you trust during this process?
Well, anytime you're dealing with anything in finance, working with someone you trust who's transparent and communicate with you has got to be your top priority.
Mhm.
So working with a mortgage professional is extremely important during this process. First, for the aforementioned, if we're going to work on an amicable, which we all hope to have an amicable resolution of our divorces. One thing I learned practicing is that I would encourage my litigants when I was a divorce attorney. You guys really want to figure this out because the last thing you want is a judge making the decision for you.
Yep.
So the more we could put both parties in the room to kind of, being having went through a divorce, it's the law is black and white, quite frankly, but every asset and liability is kind of a clog that you can move in and figure out what's a good settlement.
Mm.
A settlement I was always taught is when both parties walk out and say, "Man, that didn't work out so good for me." If you walk out and say, "Hey, I don't know," and the other spouse walks out and feels the same way, you successfully settled your case.
Mhm.
But by knowing if a refinance or a buyout is even possible,
Yeah.
that's going to give you an extra layer of negotiation when you guys are
Right.
trying to put this together. So I think that's super important. Now let's look post divorce. Okay, it's also extremely important for both parties. Let's just say that you're buying me out.
Mhm.
Well, I want to make sure that I'm still able to have a home after the fact. So
Right.
there's a lot, you want to make sure that you could achieve your post divorce goals as well. And we can't look much into the future, but we could give you an idea where you would stand today, and then kind of take it from there. Now,
Yeah.
important thing to note with qualifying income is child support and alimony. Now, child support and alimony can be used to help you qualify for a mortgage,
Right.
but that has to continue for at least 3 years. So,
Okay.
so often we see people come to us late in the divorce process. Their kids are graduating high school, but the child support's running out in 2.5 years and we can't use that income. So, it's almost beneficial to you if you're thinking about this to kind of do it early in the stage if you're going to use alimony and child support as qualifying income.
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, and so let's say that you decide to, sell the house, you get the profits from the house, you split them equally, everything's amicable and good, and then you decide you're gonna buy a new house as a single woman, let's just
Sure.
say. Can you use the same lender that you used before to
Oh
work
yeah.
with you? Okay.
Absolutely, yep. So
Cool, cool,
that I
cool.
mean, so that would be that's going to go into a topic outside of divorce. But if you already own the primary, you bought your husband out, and now you decided, hey, I want to buy a second house. That's going to be an investment property or a second home. It comes with a little bit different standard of qualification, but absolutely, we do loans. Most of our clients are repeat clients. So once you use HQM, it's very hard for you to
Mhm.
go elsewhere. But absolutely, it's all part of the process. We could look at an individual getting divorced. Maybe you're getting bought out of the home, and we could start talking about, well, this is an opportunity for you to do an investment portfolio. Maybe
Right.
we could put you into a two-family home, live in there for a year, and then save enough money into the second home, and now you're starting to build assets. So
Yep, I love that. Yeah, we're all about options and making
absolutely.
sure people have that. Okay, one of the questions I love to ask our experts, which sounds simple, but people get overwhelmed. When somebody is going through a divorce, maybe their spouse just told them that they want a divorce and they call you, what do they say on the phone, Matthew?
I've had so many of these phone calls. Most people are very stoic for the most part. Usually we get the call when the biggest word to me, which is acceptance, kicks in.
Yeah.
I think in life, we're always going to be thrown curveballs. And my personal belief is that when we stop fighting it and accept the reality, then you could actually start working through to a resolution. So I have had clients that have not been there. And so as a divorce attorney at that time, I was actually acting as a therapist, taking their
Mm,
calls multiple times a day, trying to walk them off the cliff. But for the most part, they just want their options. And um, I don't give legal advice anymore. If I'm getting a call for someone that has a divorce refinance and they want to look into it, I explain to them, I'm not giving you legal advice. However, please sit down with your significant other, see what you guys can resolve on your own.
Mhm.
Everybody usually, once the emotion is gone, because let's
Right.
face it, divorce isn't a really emotional thing. The
No.
house is an emotional thing because it's a symbol of your marriage. It's a symbol of your family. It's where your children grew up. And easier said than done. But when someone can remove the emotion from it, then we just kind of get into the brass tacks of what your goals are post divorce and how we can help you accomplish that.
I love that. So, if I was gonna call you and I'm going through a divorce, would I like say that on the phone to you? Like, what do people say? Do they say like, "Hi, I'm going through a divorce and I need options for my mortgage"?
Yeah, yeah, for the most part, most people will realize they have to start looking for those options after a consultation with an attorney.
Okay,
So they'll usually say, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying out my spouse. I want to see what it looks like," or vice versa.
got
How
it.
much equity do you think is in the home? We could run some very they're in-depth actually property analysis. It's always going to require an appraisal, but we could give you kind of a very solid guesstimate where it's going to be. And we just take it from there. It's really a goal oriented conversation if the emotions are out of it. And
Mhm.
a lot of times they'll say, okay, you could buy this out, but your mortgage payment's going to be X. Can you still do the things you want to do?
Right.
One of the biggest mistakes I see is people will overextend themselves to state of the attachment of the marital home. And it's a lot easier said than done. But if you could avoid that emotional attachment and avoid putting yourself in some financial struggle down the road, it's a big thing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, where do you work, Matthew? If somebody's listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I like his
Oh,
vibe. I want to
sure.
work with him."
So I'm a co-owner of High Quality Mortgage in Fairfield, New Jersey. We go by HQM Loans.
Mhm.
This is our 10th year in business. My
Amazing.
partner and I have been very good friends, best friends for upwards of 20 years. He was in the mortgage business for a very long time. He saw how unhappy I was going back and forth to divorce court. And he said, you know what, maybe we could take our two skill sets and build something special. So 10 years ago, I left the practice of law and we rented a conference table in the office downstairs with two computers. And 10 years later, we have 20 loan officers working for us. We're one of the top companies in the state. Our motto is we treat everybody like friends and family because that's what we would expect from ourselves. And
Mhm.
it's a homegrown company, an emphasis on transparency, being communicative, and we are all about customer service,
Oh, I
100%.
love that. I love that so much. I love your fresh start story too, about how you changed careers.
Yeah, it was
So,
a big step, big chance, but it paid off so far.
I love that. And so, do you only do loans in New Jersey, or are there any other states that you do loans in?
We're currently licensed in New Jersey, Florida, and North Carolina.
Okay, perfect, amazing.
Mhm.
Before we let you go, Matthew, if somebody's listening to this and they're going through a divorce, what would be some words of encouragement that you could leave them with?
I would say you are not the first nor the last person that's going to go through with this. There's always going to be light at the end of the tunnel. And the same kind of thing we discussed earlier. And I'm a big believer that when you feel uncomfortable, our body's natural reaction is to get out of that uncomfortable state. So we're going to fight it. We're going to resist it. We're going to blame it on A, B, C, or D. But I think that when people feel uncomfortable, if you just take a few minutes to sit with the uncomfortable feeling, acknowledge to yourself, okay, I'm going through a divorce. This stinks. I feel this way. Let it pass through you and accept the reality. And once you could accept the reality of this is where it's heading, you could also accept the possibilities of what your life's going to become.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, we're
Appreciate that.
so no, I love that. We're so happy that you're part of Fresh Starts and an
Thank
expert
you.
that we recommend to people. And if you're listening to this and you're in New Jersey, or the other states that he mentioned, his info will be in the show notes. So definitely get in touch. And I would say, like on a personal level, my mortgage lender here in New York was like my rock during my
Mhm.
divorce.
Yep.
So I knew that once I had him on board, everything would be okay. So if you're listening to this, considering divorce or going through a divorce and you need that support, definitely reach out to Matthew and his team because they are top quality, and I know you guys are moving and shaking and doing so many amazing things, so it's
And yeah, you
awesome
get
to
the
watch.
whole team. We don't just get myself. High Quality Mortgage has an amazing support staff. So we're here to support you and your mortgage needs, but we're also human. We understand emotions. So we're here to support you with whatever needs you have.
Oh, I love that so much. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Thank you, Olivia. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.